Hope you like Trek as political allegory, because you're getting a whole bunch of it today on Be Your Please, a Vile Visit to Bajor. My name is Joseph.
And boy, do I have an advanced filing system to tell you about. I'm your co-host, Peter.
Before we get into what I think will be a deeply anticipated episode for our fans here, we do have a couple things we want to talk about. First, I'm going to do some business, get it out of the way. Recently, there was a serious hurricane that came through not only just the southern part of the United States, but also came into where they don't normally go, with the interior of North Carolina. And one of our fans, actually, her name is June. I've mentioned her on the show before. She's sent us some nice emails. Reached out to us to inform us that really most of her life was obliterated as a consequence of the storm because of trees just potentially creating a total loss for her home, car, everything. And so we've already asked everybody in the Discord and Facebook to consider donating money to June, and apparently she did get enough to get that tree off her house, which was a big deal because it allows her to move forward with insurance claims and some other critical steps in the process of trying to recover. But we wanted to be able to do more for her. So as we usually do, we do a rest in peace to each season of Star Trek Review. We're almost at the end of Deep Space Nine Season 1, and we've decided we're actually going to do it live, which we do rarely now these days, but we'll do it this time. The expressed purpose of turning it into a fundraiser with a GoFundMe for June. So keep on the lookout for that. We'll send out links everywhere that we communicate with everybody so that you can be advised as to when that'll happen and when that goes live. So thank you to everybody that's already assisted June with her needs, and look forward to helping her recover as much as possible.
I want to say thank you to all the people that kicked in on that, because that's a big deal.
Yes.
We're not a big community. We've got a lot of awesome people in the small community, and usually it's cool stuff like people sending us artwork or good stories or making amazing murder coworker simulators. But whoever it was that pitched in to help her get the tree off the house, like, good on you. Good on helping, people in the same lane who are in a bad place. And I'm glad that, you and I can sit here and bullshit about Star Trek, and some real good can come out of it every now and then.
I completely agree. And I co-sign everything you just said. Thank you to everybody that did donate. It means a lot to us that people took the time to assist somebody who genuinely required the
really
help.
Gets my wife off my back when I tell her.
Yeah, like, hey, we're helping people.
I know you think I'm pissing away and making you watch the kids for an extra hour alone on Friday nights, but hey, we're out there doing good. What's the next point of business, Joe?
Peter, you before I get to indulge in talking about my favorite.
Before I turn my mic off?
Yeah, before you just say nothing for however many hours I decide to ramble. Yeah. There was a topic you specifically were like, hey man, listen, can we talk about this before you just start going off? And I thought it was really cool. It was about Vulcans.
Behind on catching our episodes, and I just listened to Move Along Home, which I love our new opening.
Yes.
I love anybody who has come into our show because they like Deep Space Nine and they're in here fresh, and they catch Ian's badass Mirror Universe Enterprise intro, and they're like, oh, cool, and like rocking out, because that's a real fucking banger. That's a good one. And then the bait and swap into our heinous recorder intro and that fucking shrill note. I know you downplay it a little bit in like later episode, but that thing is ruthless. And I just sit there in my mind's eye and I think about you guys out there playing this, and other people in the car or maybe on the bus or just anywhere where they don't want to hear someone just botch a recorder note like that.
It's the perfect botch. It is the perfect botch.
It's savage. And it's exactly what I wanted.
It was money well spent. I completely agree. Yeah.
Move Along Home. The gambling space white trash that blows through. They were relayed there by Vulcan. Vulcan science vessels out there doing like reconnaissance in the Gamma Quadrant. And that's the second time they've brought up that there's like Vulcan science survey ships out there. The other time being the one where Odo gets hit in the back and knocked out somehow.
Yeah, the rocks are somehow effective against him. Yes.
What was that one called?
Vortex, maybe? I don't remember.
Whatever. It's him helping the con man, right? They
Yeah.
go rescue his child that's hidden away. Odo lies and says that they were killed, and he gives them to the Vulcan science vessel under false pretense, and they get to go off and start new, convict lives or whatever, fugitive lives. And I'm like, man, this science team, these Vulcans, they're in there deep. And you jump back into Enterprise, where I think the real value in watching Enterprise is getting to see Vulcans before they are complete species, where they still have room to grow. And like, that's a solid ass plot
It is.
running through there. And in Enterprise, the Vulcans were very conservative. They did not explore that far away from planet Vulcan. And I kind of remember there was that other race that like would go really detail on things close by, but their footprint wasn't that big. And the Vulcans gave Earth a fair amount of shit about trying to explore out too far too fast. And certainly stuff like the Delphic Expanse had to kind of shape that conservative policy they had, where they, they're sending things past the, what was that barrier called? Thermographic barrier or something?
Thermobaric barrier or something, yeah.
And they went
The
Event
no-go
Horizon.
zone, yeah.
And they go Event Horizon because of Trellium D poisoning, as we later found out. But like, it's cool to see like, okay, well, pre-Starfleet, pre-Federation, really, the Vulcans would not have thought of doing stuff like exploring the Gamma Quadrant. And here, in Deep Space Nine in the 24th century, like they're going deep, and they're, I would say, right there neck and neck with Starfleet, maybe even potentially more adventurous than Starfleet. Because how many ships?
You'd have to assume that the Vulcan Science Directory, or whatever it's called, Science Academy, and the ships that they run out there to do scientific exploration are, that's the direction that they started heading in because of Enterprise. They were far more militaristic. They had high command. They were more focused on order and enforcing order, and the subversion of that by the Romulans is what ultimately led to the culmination of the Vulcan plotline in Enterprise. And so the idea that in the aftermath of that, really Starfleet is the defense mechanism for the entire Federation. It's not solely theirs. So what are they doing as far as like their ships and the things they want to accomplish on their own? It's only
first
science.
of all, finding people to staff them, because I thought that was amazing at the end of Enterprise, where it's like, yes, our entire government has imploded. We do not have enough people to put on ships anymore.
Yes, we have fired a lot of disloyal people. That's left us a bit short-staffed. We're running some OT right now, but we're not at minimum staffing quite yet, so we cannot come and help you.
We're exploring new AI options, actually.
More self-checkout lines.
So, and speaking to Starfleet at this point, I don't think we've really seen anything that indicates that Starfleet has put a lot of ships through the wormhole, at least have been mentioned on screen. I know that there's a diplomatic corps that was preparing to go through there, but they didn't really touch on like, or was it a trio or a quintet going through on the same ship, or were each of those guys going to be dispatched on their own vessel to start surveying?
I didn't clarify in the episodes specifically, so hard to know, but I think you're overall correct that they have made no mention on screen about the Federation's plans for the Gamma Quadrant except to explore it, and what form that's taken hasn't really been talked much about. There's certainly no installation on the other side. That's been explicitly mentioned when the Pope got caught on planet Murdertown, but yeah, is there like a Galaxy class ship out there rolling around, exploring strange new worlds, meeting new civilizations, and we haven't heard about them? Don't know. They haven't said anything.
I wish we didn't have this conversation before Duet, because I think there's a lot more to go there, and I hope it's something we can talk on soon. But the discovery of this wormhole at this point where Starfleet, which was already spread very thin, right? We've done like the space math before. It is a bad ratio of light years to starships in terms of what can realistically be within assistance distance, even with all the resources the Federation has. But like, hey, here's this amazing thing that gives us this foothold into this area with unlimited new possibilities. Like that would have been great for like season 1 or season 2 next gen era. They're
Mm-hmm.
3 years after Wolf 359.
I'm not
Like,
too excited about going into a new part of space
not
right
even that.
now.
You just don't have the resources. The vessels
Yeah.
are gone. The manpower is dead. Like, how much of Starfleet got wiped out at 359?
If I recall, we looked this up to try and get a sense of the loss. It was more than a decimation. I remember that. So it was more than 10%, which is
That
considered
really, that's a fucking, that word decimate, which by definition is a tenth, right?
right.
Like, it's such a bad word the way it's frequently used. You're just saying it was what, 30 to 40?
If I am remembering correctly what I looked up, it was a percentage with a 2 after it, which is still a ton when you consider all of the ships in Starfleet, and we're going to take away 25% of them, let's say, and they're just ashes, and most of the people on them are dead. The survivors are a bitter few that, are damaged goods,
Mm-hmm.
like Shaw and that sort of thing. And now you've got the same scope of responsibility you had before, and you're a quarter less powerful. And this is what led us to talking about why did the Federation speed run a treaty with Cardassia, because they can't afford to continue to fight low level border wars at this time. We've got to wrap this up. And if that means making a dirty deal where we're swapping planets, we've not necessarily like really protecting the interests of the people on our furthest fringe, then that sacrifice is worth having peace for everyone else.
Well, now you're starting to tie into this episode today. And who gets writing credit for great details like that? That suddenly the post scarcity utopia of the Federation is faced with a lack of vessels and manpower, a demoralizing effort, and through all these losses, now there's a real big bad. Take everything you just said about Cardassia. Yeah, there's these fucking discount Nazis over here. There's psychotic zombie robots that almost took Earth out, and they're going to come back 100%. Like, that is the eye that we need on the real prize. Oh, great. Now there's a space butthole that's stable. Wouldn't that be fun to have back before we got our two-piece uniforms? That's
right.
That's jumpsuit work. We don't really have like, that's a novelty. Great, cool, but like,
yeah, right now we're watching our 6, and we are doing everything in our power to build ships that are good at fighting, which is not something we've typically focused on. This is a society, the Federation, that has been kind of fat and happy in their technological advantage they have over the rest of the Alpha and Beta quadrants. That's the unspoken, but often very real truth at the core of all these conflicts they have with like the Klingons, the Romulans, and the Cardassians. They just punch above their weight technologically because they have a free and open society that permitted greater technological innovation, which means their ships, while not combat focused, are still more capable than the combat focused vessels that they are faced against. And that is why Starfleet often, in fact, always seems to prevail. Well, now that's not true. In fact, it's so not true. They got their shit pushed all the way in, and only got saved because of a Hail Mary play on the part of Data, of all people, and rescuing Jean-Luc Picard and finding a way to turn an off switch before it got too late. And now you're like, oh,
Data, the singular most intelligent thing in Starfleet, which coincidentally your first year officer almost killed with a piece of space garbage hooked to the warp core.
Right. He's still doing unlicensed experiments in the warp core with his blind friend.
Oh, who are you? Could you? I'm the fucking real hero of the Federation. That's Stop Locutus from Earth in the A. Don't even tell me Data doesn't have his fucking own line of like replicator cereal products. Like,
absolutely, that man has fucking merchandising for sure. But yeah, that's why the Federation goes and does everything they can to build, the 24th century Starfleet vessels, from the Steamrunner to the Akira to the
what's that initiative called?
The Advanced Starfleet Design Bureau, ASDB. And that actually ties into the plot of DS9 because that is where Cisco was stationed prior, and it's of course where the Defiant comes from as well.
Mm-hmm.
So something we already know, and we've watched First Contact. Defiant was fucking there. It's like not a secret. So,
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting how all of these details start to matter, and yeah, like you said, it even matters to a degree in this episode. Which, by the way, Peter, what was it?
This is season 1, episode 19, Duet, first aired June 13th, 1993. Teleplay Peter Allen Fields, story by Lisa Rich and Jean Carrington Fauci, which he had a stinker. Was that a writing duo? Who was that? That was a
Move Along
shit.
Home with Lisa Rich.
Oh,
Yeah,
speaking.
Feast and Famine.
Directed by James Conway.
Yeah, Jimmy Conway. You'll see his name a lot. Okay, I mean, I'm going to spend a lot of time blowing this thing. I'm going to tell stories about what I did with this when I was an undergrad to write a paper on international politics. But before I get into any of that, Peter, what'd you think of it?
I made Casey watch. I made my wife watch it with me because I knew it was going to be a good one. It held her attention through the whole thing, and I'd say this is really the first one that she sat down and watched. I wish you wouldn't have said anything about it, because when you praise or when you shit on an episode, it gives me preconceived notions that I'm kind of contending with as we go through.
Oh, good point. I'll avoid that in the future. Okay.
I would say feel free to shit on things, because I know what I like, and I'm not afraid to, say like when you're wrong on stuff, but I'm always afraid of like giving stuff too much credit and punching up the extra level. They picked the right guest actor to play the bad guy in this one. And this is a solid script. This is an excellent big performance out of him. And this is Nana Vister just doing more 10 out of 10.
Right.
I thought about this episode a lot because I knew we were going to have a big conversation. And I kind of want to jump to the end on where I arrived in terms of looking at this through the Star Trek lens.
Sure. No, I think there's the all of the craft and the production, and there's all of the interesting performance notes that you see throughout. There's the obvious real world parallel it's trying to build, but as a part of the DS9 plot, it's also extremely important. And yeah, go ahead, skip to the end. What there drew your attention?
I'm going to call this, and we've reached a few of these now. Planet regeneration was, I think, the first time I really drew my attention to this. Hey, here's some sort of potent high concept situation that feels almost a little Shakespearean, but there's going to be a strong moral twist that is going to define what this episode is. And I'm going to call it a Twilight Zone moral grounds episode.
Okay.
Where you have something that is like real world adjacent, and you're like, this is clearly them doing allegorical work, or something where there's like accessible major plot features from our world redressed into something else, and they're going to tell a story basically under false pretense, and then there's going to be the plot twist and the revelation that comes with it, and then usually some sort of bittersweet punch at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And this one was a fucking slam dunk, whereas the Pope one, I think, faltered badly. And there was another one, I can't remember, that was like the same type. Like, we really shit on it. Like, you wanted this big sweeping morality story.
Yeah.
And it just steps all over it. So I want to say, gosh, was it the one where they're fracking the moon?
Right, or the one with the farmer won't leave, and they're trying
which was like the middle ground between excellent and terrible. Like there was a lot of bad stuff there you could easily have called question to, and I think it's mostly because like the logistics of destroying this beautiful M-class planet, moon, whatever. But I think that this one is a slam dunk first and foremost because there's no technobabble in this. This is a This is a story about people and about decisions and atrocity and hurt. And yeah, there's a little bit of cosmetic surgery in there, but I'm not hearing about inverse polarity or realigning the matrix or anything else. And it lets it really just shine as a character piece and a political thriller.
And it keeping it grounded as possible allows your actors to fully invest in the material in a way that might otherwise be inapproachable if you had to deal with a lot of technobabble or science fiction gobbledygook.
That has to be a commodity too, right? Like when you're
Yeah.
like, hey, here's a great episode, and here's all this other bullshit that might piss you off more or less, versus like, this is what probably everybody wants to do, is like real drama, and we're gonna cut the sci-fi out for 5 minutes and just let you fucking go.
And when DS9 hits home runs, which I would obviously consider this one of the many it will eventually display for you, I think that that's a common thread. Its best episodes are a much lighter touch on technobabble. Sometimes it requires continuity. Sometimes it requires knowing what's going on, but it strips away as much as possible to allow performance to emerge as the way the story is being told. And this one is one that I used to write about a historical counterfactual when I was in undergrad. So the plot is very much set up along the lines of, okay, what if you found a Eichmann-like middleman who was involved in a genocidal act, and your main character is a member of the species or subgroup that was the oppressed, murdered group, and they are trying to pull the Nuremberg trial trick of putting them on trial and bringing them to account. And there's ways you can do that story, but this one is particularly interesting to me. It's one that I ended up writing a paper about because it is one where specifically where the bad guy race, the Cardassians, they weren't defeated. They're not fallen. They're not out of power. Like in the real life parallel to this is Nazi Germany.
Of course.
They ran camps. They worked people to death. They just murdered people. The history's greatest monsters, right? Like a real stain on humanity in general. The end of that story is the destruction of that regime and the final death of their ideology and the coming to accounts of everything that led up to allowing that to happen and forcing everyone to take responsibility for what they did, particularly in Germany itself, a civilizational trauma they live with to this day. Okay. Well, what if you have a very similar circumstance where Germany didn't lose? It was all kind of a draw. They're still there. They just stopped doing this genocide thing that they were doing before. But they're still there, and the guilty parties never were put in prison. They were their sins were never called to account, and the people themselves within the Cardassian Empire never had to really cotton to what they were party to, even if it was incidental, right? And that was the big lesson. That was the big lesson coming out of the Second World War, was normal Germans who may have had some inclination of what was going on, having to be confronted with the mass monstrosity that took place in their names. And what happens when you don't have a population that's had to face any of that, but instead you have one character who sees the necessity of doing it? And what could they be driven to do? Because they were party to this incredible, terrible moral void, and they've never been able to recover from their own personal cowardice in the face of allowing it to happen. And it's a very well written and then extraordinarily well performed take that I don't think anyone necessarily would have expected at the time, because it's building itself up as the Nuremberg trial story, or like, okay, we accidentally caught Eichmann, we got him, and now we got to prove he's Eichmann, and we're going to put him on trial. We're going to have this big moral show of force where the Bajorans are going to step up and they're going to be able to realize their destiny here. And you think that's what the plot's going to be about. And then it halfway through, it pulls the rug out from under you and be like, no, this guy isn't actually the bad guy. And that carries itself trauma for everyone involved, Kira included, who obviously this episode is primarily about. So I love it. I think that if you're talking about when Trek can really move beyond its material. It can elevate beyond being network sci-fi on random channels and syndication and
Mhm.
really like deliver art. This is what it looks like. There's no B plot here. We're on one train the whole way. And it starts with, I think, a very important revelation about Kira specifically as a character. And that is, this freighter shows up. They say they have someone who has a very specific disease called Kalanora syndrome that apparently, as Kira fills everybody in, is something you only could have gotten by being at a place called the Galatep labor camp, which is basically Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And Kira was there when it was liberated, right? So it's not that she's aware of it, not that it's Bajoran legend. Kira personally was there when the place got liberated. So think about that in terms of its real world parallel. She was one of those 101st Airborne guys you saw in Band of Brothers find the concentration camp, right? She saw the horror unvarnished in the real right in front of her. She knows exactly how bad this was, right? And she's probably one of the few people in the galaxy who can say that.
So this Galatep labor camp, this is on the surface of Bajor.
Yes.
Her recap on it is gruesome. And it's another thing I wanted to kind of mention. Like, Deep Space Nine's very upfront using the words sex, which seems jarring. I think mostly for us because we went through Voyager, which was very
chaste,
despite, 7 of 9s and the exploitation of that. Like, they weren't saying sex. To our international audience, I'm sure these are like very silly conversations we're having, but through Next Gen, through Voyager, whatever, like, there's implied sex, but you're not saying sex. You're not talking about people's Dabo employee contracts obligating them into sex. I was thinking, I was like, man, the one counter to that was whatever episode where you kind of learn about Tasha Yar and whatever failed colony she was in.
Yeah.
Like, there was specific mention, like, that failed colony was so far off the rails that I think the line is something like, I grew up running from rape gangs or something.
Correct. Yes.
That's like, that was such a shocking use of language there that when Decipher put out the card game, they changed the language on that card to hunter gangs. And that kind of like clued me into like, man, that must have been a really strong phrase to use. Jump into this episode and like, that's right there on the list of charges. People being burned alive, or I'm sorry,
Mothers
people
being raped in front of their children, like
raped
not
in front
just
of their
rape.
children.
Yeah.
Buried alive. Like, this thing sets Cardassians working this Galatep thing at like full 10 out of 10, Nazi out of Nazi, war criminals by every other name. Like, this is a hell on Bajor, and it puts a lot of her fever and anger and exactly what you said. I mean, this is a Kira Nerys episode, and this actually ties right back into that one about the guy who ran away and he's on the planet that they want to frack the core for whatever reason and destroy.
Right. It's a perfectly serviceable planet they're going to destroy
because Bajor's too good for fucking fission or solar or whatever. But she has a lot of trauma kind of come up in that one, and the one where, I don't know, man, that's interesting now, because that episode, and specifically Oops, I Killed Your Pope, when she's reconciling with Kaiopaka and like playing her hand that like she has seen some shit and she has done some shit and she is not happy about any of it, and one bad thing has forced her hand to do other bad things, and that there's this real cycle of violence that she is caught in. And when you have episodes like this that really illustrate the shit she's gone through and seen and witnessed, like, not the way you really want to live life, seeing that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, some people...
Yeah, like, it's conveyed in this episode, she started fighting when she was 12. Okay, so she was a literal child fighter in a resistance cell. So she spent her entire teenage years and young adulthood murdering Cardassians wherever she could as a desperate civilizational defense against their continued exploitation and industrial murder of the Bajoran people themselves. And when you understand that, she's a child soldier terrorist with gallons of blood on her hands, that she is haunted by both that as well as the necessity to do so as a consequence of the horrors being inflicted upon them. Her being kind of a fucking wild card that's willing to go to Cisco's boss suddenly seems kind of mild.
He
Like, this
calls
is
her
not.
out on killing civilians too, doesn't he?
He does, which she does not deny. And she will. I mean, this is definitely part of her plot. So this is the audience finally getting to really understand Kira and the depth of what she's had to go through. Right? She is no mere like I was in the military, or no mere I was like a counter-revolutionary. No, since I was a kid, I was involved in terrorism against a totalitarian state bent on the wholesale destruction of my people. I hate them.
It was Ro Laren that had to watch her dad get tortured to death, right?
Correct.
Do we know anything about Kira's family yet? I don't remember. Like, the two
Not
characters are
yet.
bleeding in my head.
Her family have not yet made an appearance.
Okay.
So there's
So at first, she thinks that the people with the what's the Galatep syndrome called?
Kalanora.
She thinks it's Bajoran survivors.
Right.
She's going down to sickbay to go, greet this person and basically give him a hug and say, "Hey, I got your back." And she is very surprised to find that it is a Cardassian instead that is down there. And there is no hugging. There is a cold look of horror and, radio call down to security because she's caught herself a war criminal.
Odo and Cisco have very important roles in this episode as well. And they are supporting roles that are well honed for what they end up doing and how they handle their circumstances. First, it's Cisco having to balance a very delicate political situation. He is left with three competing impulses that he has to manage, which I think is quite interesting. One, he has to follow the rules of the Federation, which is I can't detain someone because out of the suspicion that they might be some kind of war criminal. There needs to be some kind of crime they committed, or I can't arrest them. Then I've got the Bajorans who are saying, we don't care about your rules. We're going to go collect them. And there's kind of an implied threat on their part that they won't cotton to Cisco interfering with them. And he's got Gul Dukat yelling in his other ear, saying, if you don't let him go, because he's not the guy he's being accused of being, then you're going to have a problem with me. And this is obviously precisely the circumstance he's been sent to manage, right? He's supposed to manage his relationship with the Cardassians and help the Bajorans join the Federation by any means short of breaking the Prime Directive. And now he's got a problem where he has no good answers for what to do, right?
And that's not even covering his interpersonal issues on the station, where he has a subordinate who is real keen on lynching this guy, who he has butted heads with several times on similar situations, up to and including full-blown mutiny courtesy of telepathic orbs.
Invisible telepathic orbs.
That can get sucked out of airlocks. What a terrible fucking episode that was.
Really, like
everything you said about Move Along Home not in fact being the worst episode of Deep Space Nine. I think, what was it called? Like Dramatis Personae or something? Like,
yeah.
Throw that one right in the trash. But the one thing you could take out of it was like, yeah, Kira's serious business about these fucking, the wanting more Cardassian blood. Not happy about the amount of Cardassian blood on her hands. And also not happy that there isn't more blood on her hands.
Right. There's a push and pull there. Like,
it's a real catch-22.
She's not a depraved person, which I think they do a good job of drawing a line around. From her episode when they're on the murder planet to here, Kira is a woman who has done a lot of dirt in her time, but she is burdened by the consequences of the choices that she has made. And yeah, you've got Cisco now who's dealing with a subordinate that's unreliable and desperately wants to lynch this guy. Rules that could possibly demand one side or the other or both get very mad at you. And he's got to find a way to deal with this while having very tense conversations on very small view screens in his office.
Mm-hmm.
And parallel to that is Odo, who is out there doing the detective work that he should be doing as the chief of security. And this is where it comes off really strong because he taps into old contacts. He finds a way basically to con Gul Dukat into actually giving him the assistance he needs so that he can crack the case. He picks up on the key clues, and he's the one that comes forward with the revelation in the end that this guy isn't who he is trying to portray himself as. And I think in both cases they do the right things to support the story. They provide to Kira the right help for her to have from their characters, and it builds them too, because Cisco is shown to be able to navigate a very difficult situation, shows why he's in charge, and Odo is shown to be not only extremely capable investigator, but obviously personally quite fond of Kira in a way we hadn't seen before.
I really like the scene where it's becoming a concern to Cisco that Kira is too close, that there's a conflict of interest, and that she is not going to be able to conduct what is going to be a highly scrutinized investigation. And he does something very reasonable, and it's I'm going to take you off the case, the same way he took Odo off the case on the murder of, oops, I cloned a Khan, right?
Correct.
And he confronts her in the fucking replimat.
Right.
He's waiting down in the voyeur vent, sees her about to eat, comes out, ambushes her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, I know I could have called you to my office, or we could have talked in your quarters, or I don't know, a fucking hallway walk and talk. I'm going to tell you that basically I'm insulting you. I'm saying that you are not professional or clinical enough to handle this. And we're going to let Odo, which is a reasonable ask, like, hey, this is our chief of security, let him do his manhunt thing. And I figured that was going to be that. Like, she was going to get butthurt and maybe somehow work with Odo behind the scenes or something. And in fact, she successfully, gets a 20 on her diplomacy roll and is like, I need to do this. It needs to be a Bajoran. And I basically give you my word that I will be as thorough and impartial as possible. And Kira's really, and again, a lot of this has been through like alien influence or duress or whatever, shown herself to not be impartial, right?
Right.
She has made a lot of
extremely biased decisions. Yeah.
Emotional decisions. And when she swears that, I was like, okay, well, this is going to be a great episode, because either A, she's going to betray his trust and there's going to be fallout from that, or B, something's going to go sideways and she's going to have to come at odds with her people. And there's going to be this like, you've been co-opted, you're not loyal to the cause anymore. And like all the accusations really that were made when that guy wanted to blow up the wormhole, remember?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think that might have been like
super
the first
terrorist that didn't want to come in.
That was the Ursula and Bator episode, and he basically accused her back then and just said, you're a sellout and you're not down with Sparkle Motion anymore. So that is a framing device, like her securing the investigation. It's like, this is going to be a win-win either way we slice it. So great scene there. I still, if I was Cisco, would not have been bringing her bad news while she's trying to eat like
gotta vary the sets, man. You gotta you can't be doing this in ops every time.
Listen, man, it's a fucking office, all right? You just
So the thing you already mentioned, the guy who makes this plot tick is the gentleman they have hired to play the main character, who he
Harris
is
Yulin.
Yeah, he is
100+ IMDb entries on this guy.
This dude is this huge stage actor too, which I think is what shines through here. He's a man in a lot of makeup to play a Cardassian, but Armin Maritza is the character's name, and he he turns in exactly the performance I think he was told to give, which is like, okay, here's where you're supposed to be. You are the lowest form of clerical, life in the Cardassian army. You're just a clerk, and you
And
were at
again,
Auschwitz.
I don't want to cut you off here, but Cardassian culture, as we have seen it through Next Gen, specifically the chain of command stuff between the guy that interrogates Picard, like everybody is military. This is not an optional career. Like this is their life. They are a constant police state, mandatory or compulsory military service. And within the culture of Cardassia itself, this isn't like, okay, well, you opted into this to be, it's like you have somehow wormed your way into the least violent soldier in a very violent organization possible.
And he's a man who was shattered by the experience of being proximal to incredible monstrosity. And he can't handle it. He can't handle what he saw. He can't handle what he heard, to the point where the huge monologue moment at the end where he talks about how he wept under his bed because the screams were just kept happening all the time, and it broke him such that he chose a path where he was going to try and expose what happened in a way that so deeply embarrassed Cardassia that it would cause the Cardassian people themselves to have to face what they're responsible for, even at the expense of his own life, as penance. It's an incredible path to put someone on, to say you're this guy and you're going to try to convince this person that you are like a big bad SS, Nazi, guy. You're in charge. You were in charge of this concentration camp. You're in charge of you're Rudolph Hess. You're in charge of this concentration camp, but you're not. You're this other guy, and you feel really bad that you didn't do anything to stop this. And he gets there all the way. By the end, he is very convincing as a man who is not the dude he's trying to be. Then he only knows how to do like a sort of like an homage, like a pastiche of Rudolph Hess. He's still just the filing clerk guy. He only knows bluster, and when he gets exposed, he doesn't have another place to retreat to. He just kind of collapses because he is kind of a meek fellow, right? That's why he's in the position that he's in now. And the choice to do the plot this way not only makes the whole thing very unique and very interesting, because it forces Kira to go through a much different arc than you thought she was going to have to go through, but it makes you sympathize with the person you thought was going to be the villain, right? Like it makes you at the end, where he's clearly devoted to the idea of dying as a consequence of paying the price for just even being there, makes sense.
Everything with this character works. Him first appearing to just need medical attention, the revelation that he was at this terrible labor torture camp before the characters on screen even really have a chance. You start asking yourself, like, why the fuck would this guy, if he's potentially, even if he's not part of this labor camp, why would any Cardassian civilian or military adjacent person go anywhere Deep Space Nine? Like, red flags there. The investigation, I think, holds up, where they're like looking at like old photos because Cardassians wiped out a bunch of evidence when they were withdrawing from Bajor, so this kind of stuff specifically couldn't happen. There's the truth of the investigation and the way things look like they're going. Kira being confronted with it and having to like make these decisions on her own of like, do I care about revenge or do I care about the truth? There's the things that her friends are saying to her and her coworkers are saying to her. Then there's this guy egging her on because he identifies her as like his best chance to get in front of a military tribunal.
Right. With very clever ploy on his part, right? I need to find the most aggro bitch there is and make sure I piss her off enough that I get put in front of the docket and I get handed the death penalty as quickly as possible, because he knows his story can't last too long, right? He needs to fucking cash this in and get killed, so that the story can get out. And he picks the right person.
the timing they have on like at what point is he sticking to the story that he is a innocent civilian versus yes, I was there, but I am what is actually my true identity, which is this hapless file clerk, to I was the commandant of the facility masquerading as the file clerk. And yes, here I am in all my grandeur, super mustache twirling. My only regret is that I didn't kill more Bajorans. Like the pacing is really good on this. This guy's like big performance notes punch hard, and when he's kind of talking small, like stage actor is exactly what this guy needed to be.
Right. No,
And,
no, it's
and
the perfect guy to hire because in the end, he's just doing a lot of sustained, reverse shot with Kira.
I
And
love it works great. I love him giving Kira the runway that she hasn't really had the opportunity to act on yet, which is like, I'm giving you everything you wanted. I am the ultimate bad guy. And now we can have this like intense BDSM session essentially where we're just yelling at each other, abusing, and there's like no pulled punches. I'm a terrible war atrocity guy, and you are a civilian murdering terrorist, and we are blood enemies. And I want to egg you on to a point where you've got me on the next shuttle going down to Bajor so I can go in front of a firing squad. And like this realization that she's saying these things and she's not happy to see this part of her coming out. And I
yeah.
think that's a big part of the episode, like why she starts tapping the brakes on this is that she's never had the opportunity to say some of this stuff out loud and really just have someone in front of her to like beat up verbally. And once it starts happening, like she does not like how it feels and how it happens.
I mean, that's what her big scene with Odo is ultimately about, where she gets the first revelation from him that he is supposedly he's not just Armin Maritza, he is in fact Gul Darheel, the man who is in charge of the labor camp.
A man
And
so evil, his last name is Heel.
yes. And it's where Odo's trying to comfort her, right? Like, I got some tea from Quark's special, supply of this. Like, how did he get it? Did Quark just give it up? Did Odo seize it? Who knows, right? Like, that's not the important part. The important part is that he went out of his way for her, something we've not seen him do for anybody. And, try to counsel her, try to calm her, try to say, like, why don't you take a break from this? Like, he's gonna get killed for this, right? Like, you should preserve yourself. Don't allow yourself to be drawn in and for the worst part of you to emerge. And it's in that conversation when she reveals like the level of personal insult that was involved, that he's why, because he's dispassionate, that he wises up to like, that seems like bait. Why did he do that? That doesn't
Why
make
would
any
he even
sense.
know who you are? He's running a death camp. Like maybe if he was Cardassian, like Obsidian Order or some sort of like counterterrorism unit, like they might know who you are. But a prison camp guy knowing you specifically doesn't add up. And like that's I think the first moment where she's like, fuck, you're right. Something is fucky here.
Yeah, she never until the end really starts to try to deny it and doesn't give up. She gives up on it pretty quick. But she talks to Dax about this too, where Kira confides, like, I want him to be something worse than a file clerk. I desperately want satisfaction for Bajorans. I want him to come to justice and for Bajorans to do it and for him to be an important person that caused us suffering that we get to take and punish for having hurt us. That's something that we haven't gotten to do. It's something that's where the interesting part of what I ended up writing about when I was in undergrad, I thought was to say, well okay, the defeated Germans became the subjects of the people that they abused. Poland took a huge part of their country for themselves. They were occupied by all of the major Allied forces, and they were forced into supplication and kind of deal with the consequences of their actions in a way that had provided closure for everybody. What if that didn't happen? What if the Jews, looked around and the Nazis are still out there? and you finally get your hands on one of the really bad ones, wouldn't you just want to crush him to make yourself feel better? Like, I got this piece of justice out of you. I fucking got this from you. And it has to feel good because otherwise I've been denied it because you're still fucking there. You're mocking us every day by denying that you did this to us. And if I can grab just one of you and put you on trial and show the world how terrible you are, then that proves how terrible you are. That proves the truth of my own eyes, of Kira's eyes, that she experienced liberating that camp, which is what I find so important about what she says at the beginning. This isn't conjecture on the basis of the historical record. She goes and passionately describes women being raped in front of their children, husbands being beaten into unrecognizable pulps, old people being buried alive because they couldn't work anymore. Like, she saw the consequences of those things herself. She tells Cisco that. She gets offended at the idea that Cisco is being dispassionate about it at all. And for her to have to meet somebody that's embodying all of the things that she would want, and then have to come to the realization that it's all a fugazi, he's faking it because he's exactly like her, except on the opposite end of the transaction. Brilliant. Brilliant. Because it forces Kira to do exactly what you would want her to do, which is to listen and to hear and to make a connection with this guy who is everything she wants to hate, was actually there, and is so damaged and horrified by what he had nothing to do with and was made to go there, and still hates himself for having been there so much that he wants to get himself killed in the most spectacular way possible to bring justice to the people that were murdered around him. That's exactly the sort of person she is. And that's why she's like, I have to let you go because no more good people can die. We can't do this anymore.
It's interesting you saying that, he's there on the same transaction on the other side. The part she doesn't really have to face is like, this guy has the same amount of trauma. He's got guilt where she's got rage, and he has conviction to lie and cheat in an effort to see justice done. Whereas she does not. And like having to kind of carry that forward, like, I had a chance to strike a real blow. This dude was willing to take one for the cause. I wasn't. Have I lost my touch? Like, if I'm willing to kill civilians and other stuff, like, here's a guy that was the willing sacrifice. Like, I get why they didn't go that direction, but like, it will be something to see her have to kind of reflect on later on.
Right. I think it's the consequence of what she said, which is, she's responsible for doing all this dirt, but she hated doing it. She didn't want to be the person. She's horrified by her own actions. And, Maritza says, like, Maritza's dead. Maritza deserves to die. That's what he says about himself, right? Like, I don't deserve life. I was a coward and hid under my bed while people were murdered around me.
And she even says that initially too in the beginning. It was like, it doesn't matter if he was a guard pulling a trigger or just a guy back there. Like, everybody in that facility that was Cardassian needs to die.
And I think she comes to the conclusion, of course, that she was wrong about that. That this situation is more complex than she's ever going to be able to subscribe such a A-B solution to. Like, there are Cardassians that are people, and those people may have been so horrified by what happened that they were willing to die just as much as she was to do something about it. And it just took a completely unexpected and different form than she ever anticipated when it happened. But to Kira's credit as a character is that she in the scene where she confronts him, and the way that her dialogue is used to show her sort of like already coming to the conclusion of like, I have to let this man go. In fact, I have to kind of forgive this man because that's the correct thing to do right now because he's in pain, and I that's what I actually can do.
Yeah, and they don't call it out. She's not having a follow-up conversation with Dax about this, but like, I can sit here and say, okay, she has seen a part of herself that she does not like and recognizes is ugly revenge lady. And now she has evidence that not only is this guy effectively innocent of any hands-on war crime. Like, yeah, he's participating by association or whatever, but like this dude's ready to kill him. This guy went through reconstructive plastic surgery to like look like the bad guy, throw his entire life away, walk away from a very comfortable life where he had a housekeeper, and get ready to basically hand himself over to like torture and execution. So like not only was he not technically guilty, but this guy is morally just and ready to go down for the cause. Can I allow this to happen? Can I give ugly revenge Kira that win, or am I going to have to start reining myself in? We need to talk about Caldecott.
Oh yeah, yeah. We haven't mentioned him too much. He's makes an appearance for the first time in many episodes.
Wonderful appearance. This guy has so much fucking shitty dookie bravado to him. So like you said, Odo's like, well, this seems fucky. Let me just call Junior Hitler up here real quick because I got a cell phone number.
He used to be my boss. I need to call him up.
Hey, you sack of shit.
Hey, remember when you cheated at chess, you fuck ass?
It's not even hey, do you remember? It's Ducat like, oh, we used to play chess. We're such good friends. He's like, fuck you, man. You steal cards. Like, you're a cheating piece of shit. And him being like, I know, fuck you. You bucket of shit. I sure did. What's up, Odo? How can I help? And he's like, well, I need records for your decorated death camp hero. And he's like, well, absolutely not. He's like, well, I got him here. And the Ducat's face like, what the fuck are you talking about? What?
Oh, the panic that enters his face when, like, because both Cisco and Odo actually try to tell him, like, we understand that this is bad if this man is this guy, right? Like, Cisco doesn't want the international incident of like handing this dude over to the Bajorans and the Bajorans putting a show trial and the fucking Cardassians being mad about it, because that's exactly what he's supposed to not be doing right now.
Sure.
But and then Odo knows as well of like, what do you mean he says he's Goldar Heel? It's like, he's saying he's Goldar Heel. Ducat, like, what do you need me to fucking tell you again? He's saying he looks like him. He says he's him. He's
pictures.
The lie on purpose.
He knows the stuff. He's saying that he's murdering people and throwing them in wood chippers and shit. And like the look of kind of like panic on Ducat's face for a second, because it's like, well, you know, we're right up there with the Romulans as far as being treacherous, shifty motherfuckers. Like, is that really him? Was there a big false funeral and maybe this guy is alive and well, and you know there's some weird Obsidian Order thing going on, and somehow these hillbilly Bajorans actually have this like there's enough confusion and the stakes are high enough that like finally Ducat's like, yeah, listen, I'll give you the fucking files, man.
The shock on his face and the way he expresses it should erase all doubt to the audience and anybody else that the Cardassians are not playing a game here. They're like, I'm sorry, the fuck did you say? Like, that's not good. It's all very bad.
I was at his funeral. This guy is dead. Half of Cardassia was there. I don't know what's happening. And it just, I thought it was really good misdirection too, because through the whole thing, like until the end, when they're basically admitting and all the cards are on the table, like really anything can go. You've got an accomplished organization. You've got enough space science in play that like anything could really go. And they do a nice job flip-flopping the plot back and forth. But yeah, I really enjoyed the Gul Dukat stuff. Like real excellent dirty hookup.
I don't think I have too much more to say about the episode, to be honest, because how much more can you say about these scenes where you have Maritza building his fake story and then going into like acting like he's Goldar Heel, the way that he's very just only surface level able to pull the trick off. He only knows the version of Darheel he observed. And so
the cartoonish version almost.
Yeah. And it's like he knows that play has a very limited lifespan, so he needs to get arrested as quickly as possible to make an international incident out of this, and time to the point where he knows like the fact that this interrogation continues is that he starts talking about like how many people have you killed, Kira? How many civilians did you murder? What death and
That was his big
depravity are you
mistake.
responsible for?
That blew up in his face. Had he not gone down that path and forced her to confront her own demons, she might have been willing to whoosh him off and have him taken down. When she's like, we're going to let you go. We're going to send you home. I could have gone for a point, been like, they're going to kill me, right? What I was trying to do here was like not at all what they would have wanted me to do. And when I get back there, they're going to put me through the chipper shredder. So
Right.
Either way, you are consigning me to death. And one is a good death that I signed up for. And two is a lot of waterboarding before they finally finish me. So short of somebody stabbing me in the kidney on my way to the ship, like I am not going to get an easy death out of. Oh! There is Odo right next to him, who has been nothing but the consummate great security professional who I believe the jury is still out right now as to what Odo sees out of, because if his mouth is there for decoration, I assume his eyes are as well. And this is a man that is a blob that has full situational awareness, and some drunk Bajoran wino
It was in a drunk tank earlier in the episode,
who I would think Odo would already have an eye on because this guy's into shenanigans, comes running up from behind and one hit kills Maritza.
Yeah,
like straight up
not
Team
even
Fortress,
an utterance. Yeah, it's just like
Team Fortress 2 spy knife kill, right?
Yes,
just full
absolutely.
Backstab. No post-mortem revival techniques. Was Bashir just hanging out there? Bashir's got a bad habit of being around people who die, so he can be the one to give the bad news. But yeah,
I don't think he was there. It was just Kira and Odo.
Androids have an off switch on their lower back. Cardassians have a dead button.
Just
they have a secondary brain, and that's where all the really important brain stuff is, in their kidney. And that drunk guy, he knew exactly where to pop them. So yeah, Odo very slow on the escort. Big fail there. I'd say that should probably go in his permanent file, but again, it's a episode that has a big moral thrust. And again, I mean, you've watched Twilight Zone episodes before, right? Like,
oh, sure.
Being able to tell these big stories with wild twists.
And minimal opportunity to provide context before you have to deploy the story too.
Yeah.
It's got to be completely self-contained. And I think the Twilight Zone comparison in terms of the structure of the storytelling here works really well.
Yeah, Twilight Zone moral quandary. That's what I'm calling these.
And to me, the sauce is found in Kira. Like, you can really understand where Kira is coming from and what motivates her character and who she actually is. She is the very opposite of every Starfleet person we've ever seen. She's a child soldier terrorist that put on a uniform at the end of a long, bloody struggle in which, she learned to hate the people that she was disposing of. And here she is faced with the Rudolph Hess of the Auschwitz she personally liberated and has to find a way to bury her own demons and be the kind of person that she told Kaiopaka that she wanted to be. And the fact that this show has got enough confidence in its continuity and its actors and its writers to invest this early in a plot line of that kind of magnitude for one of your key players is just a sign of things to come, because this is something that they start to be able to deploy all across the cast. And that's why the show ends up being as amazing as it is, because it's not just Kira that ultimately gets this kind of depth.
Boy, if only they could brought old Benjamin Maxwell back out for some of these. This stuff certainly puts his actions in a much different light.
Yeah, and O'Brien's too, right? Like, everybody that was, maybe not liking these dudes, he'll have a bit of a fucking point.
Yeah.
But we've got one more episode here in season 1 of Deep Space Nine, Peter, and what is it called?
Season 1, episode 20, In the Hands of the Prophet. Oh no, here we go back to our fucking Azeroth quest. Ugh. Orthodox Bajorans object to secular teachings about the wormhole and the station's school, causing tensions between fundies and the Starfleet crew.
Why'd you go, ugh? Did you see something? Did you see something important?
Yeah, saw Kai Opaka, or no, so Kai Wynn in there.
This is going to be the debut of the greatest villain of the Star Trek universe, and is that close?
I don't know, man. I don't see Martha Hatchet in here anywhere.
You think that fucking the Trap Queen is anything?
The Burn Queen, for starters, use a proper terminology.
Yeah, Janeway's the Trap Queen, and she was the Burn Queen. But Kai Wynn is the. I mean, I'm telling you, Peter, I'm going to call it right now. By the end of the series, there'll be no doubt in your mind, no doubt whatsoever. And they fucking start early with this bitch. Like they give you they give you no time to think you're gonna fucking like her. So I look forward to watching. I also
want to say in this duet episode, shout out to that guy making mention that he could go for some yamak sauce.
Oh yeah, we had a quick Cardassian yum yum sauce mention. You know, O'Brien got exactly one line. I think, like, trying to like do the enhance thing from Blade Runner.
Also, this story did again heavily feature, I mean, for a background actor or whatever, this Bajoran tech person that seems like assigned in his orbit.
Correct.
I'm curious if they're building her up for something, because I see someone who looks like it could be her in this thumbnail, and I think that'd be cool if like Kai Wynn starts turning station crew against their Starfleet peeps. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it, but this was a good one, man, and it's accessible. The asks are minimal in terms of like space bullshit, and you're bringing in strong personalities to portray ultimately very sympathetic characters, and you're really putting main cast through a grinder.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really talk much about her because we've praised her so many other times. But before we conclude our episode, let's just like say, Nana Vista, fucking amazing. I mean, we talked about the guest player here who was asked to do a lot with material that he's not native to. We've sung Rene Abajo's praises, and he deserves it. Even Cisco in this episode was less psychotic than usual. Nana Vista's the best part of the show, and certainly the best part of season 1. And really, the show feels like it's about her, right? It really does seem to center on her story as a surrogate for the Bajorans in general, which I thought was kind of bold of them to do. And this is just the perfect way to leave that.
Do you think they lean on her to the degree they do? Like, okay, we know we've got a solid actor that can do this, but like, give her more episodes. Give her more. It's just kind of this fuck you to like Michelle, what's her face?
Michelle Forbes.
Like,
that was supposed to be you, girl. This was supposed to be
you, bitch. Look, wasn't that a juicy role? You think she's gonna get a Peabody or whatever fucking awards are touching us?
It's one of those things where like Nana Vista didn't really have much of a career before this or after this that was notable, but like she nailed playing Kira so hard.
How could she have had an career before this? Because it seems to me like she just had a 2-liter bottle full of Kira Nerys and she was just shaking that bitch.
Just getting ready, the whole right?
She's in Hollywood. She's like, man, I'm going to pop the cork on this and we're going to blow this to the moon.
Yeah, I mean, every single scene she's in, her every facial expression that she delivers on. I was forced to compare this for a moment in my mind to some of the stuff that comes out these days, like the Acolyte Star Wars show, where like your main character was incapable of showing any kind of facial emotion, what felt like for the entire season. And you see this, and there's like more acting ability in approximately 25 seconds of Nana Vista than in a lot of products that you see these days. And we'll be privileged to watch more of it in the future, including next week. We'll see everybody then.